Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 181. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I am going to get into talking about the Mesopotamian region today, as I have been telling you in the past few podcasts that I want to talk about this area. This is a very lively area, even to this day, but we're not going to we will talk about what's going on in this area today, and there's a lot going on in this area today, but we're going to also talk about, we're going to start by talking about this area 7,000 years ago. We're going to talk about the Sumerian people, beginning with the Sumerian people, but we're going to go through a little history of this area. Beginning in this podcast, definitely not going to finish talking about all of this history and the history that I want to get to in this podcast, but I want to talk about this in the beginning of this podcast, especially since I've been telling you that I want to, get into this history. And then at the end of the podcast, I want to save some time to talk about what's going on in this area today, 7,000 years later. So I want to start by talking about the way that we view time today. I mean, if you look at the United States of America, it's roughly 240 years old. When you're looking at all of human history, 240 years is not a lot of time. I think about the humanist teachers in Florence in the 15th century who started the Italian Renaissance. They were really focused on resurrecting what they called the classics, classical Rome and classical Greece, and resurrecting their art, resurrecting their philosophy, resurrecting what they considered the classics. And I think about us today, if we went back to what we call ancient Rome, the beginning of the Roman Empire, like the beginning of the reign of Octavian, you would go back 2,000 years to the first century. But if Octavian went back to the beginning of the Sumerian nation, he would have to go back 5,000 years. It would take Octavian double the time, more than double the time, to go back to the beginning of the Sumerian nation as it would take us from today to go back to what we call ancient Rome. I mean, what would you call, if we call Rome ancient, what would you call the Sumerian nation? Ancient, because, I mean, we classify those times and by periods of the Stone Age, the Copper Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. I mean, it's ancient, just to give you a little perspective. So the Sumerian civilization started with a city. Let's go back here. And it started with this city. This city right here is called Uruk. And Uruk is where we get the name Iraq. All right. Uruk, right here. Uruk. And Uruk is where we get the name Iraq. Their entire civilization starts with this city. And the one thing you need to know about the Sumerian people is that no one knows where they came from. They're very mysterious people. If people tell you that they know where the Sumerian people came from, the people who founded this first city of Uruk. Um, they're giving you a theory because nobody knows for sure. There's some theories that they came from the water, from some far off land through the Persian Gulf. There's some theories that they came from the mountains, but far off mountains past the Caspian Sea. Nobody knows exactly where they came from because we can't trace their language anywhere. Their language was very, very unique. It wasn't a Semitic language like the other people of this area spoke. And even the Hebrew language comes out of the Semitic Akkadian language. And the Sumerian language was very unique, very different, and we have no idea where it came from. Therefore, we have no idea where they came from. And this mystique about the Sumerian people leads us to, there's a very, very deep rabbit hole, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, about the Sumerian people, about the Anunnaki. I'm not going to be getting into that today or at all because it doesn't serve any purpose for me. I'm not going to be talking about the Stargate and how the Anunnaki came from a planet right outside of our solar system, and they brought all of this advanced technology to the Sumerian people. I won't be talking about that stuff. If you're interested in that stuff, there's tons of episodes of the Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. What I want to focus on and what's going to serve the purpose of the story that I want to tell is I want to talk about the social structure and caste system in Sumeria, the way they lived. I want to talk about their religion, which was very central to their social structure, how they worshipped and honored their gods collectively. Because, like I was telling you in the last podcast, the Sumerians gave us collective worship. They were the first ones to worship in these cities collectively, and they had a very, very elaborate worship system. But not only collectively, privately, they had a way that they worship privately. And I want to talk about their mythology and their theology, but as it relates to occultism and witchcraft that still exists today. And then I want to take us from the Sumerian people to the Akkadian Empire. And the Akkadian Empire was founded by Sargon the Great. I want to talk about him, and I want to talk about the Akkadians. And Sargon, he conquered not only Sumeria, but what they call from sea to sea. And when they talked about sea to sea, they talked about from the Mediterranean, this area, which would become Canaan. We're going to talk about Canaan, and the Persian Gulf area, which is the area which is Kuwait, and I don't think Iraq has a little bit. I think there's a little bit of Iraq right there on the Persian Gulf as well. So Sargon, he conquered all of this area. His grandson reinforced his empire and took it to its zenith. We're going to talk about the Akkadian Empire, and then from the Akkadian Empire, I want to talk about the Babylonian Empire, and then from all of that history, I want to get into the man, the legend, the father of many nations, Abram, who would become Abraham. He was from this city. This is the second city in the Sumerian nation. It's called Ur, and Abram was from Ur. This is a coastal area, which is current day Kuwait. And like I said, Abraham is the father of many nations. This period of time, you need to understand that there was no, the period of time that we're going to get started talking about this, there was no Abrahamic faiths. I mean, we think about how the Abrahamic faiths dominate our planet today, either Islam or Christianity or Judaism. And these are huge religions in our world today. But this period of time that we're going to be talking about, beginning in this history, there was no Abrahamic faith. There was no Abrahamic religion. The only religion that there was is what I've been calling witchcraft and occultism. So we're going to talk about Abram, how he comes, and he is the first Jew. He's the father of many nations again, and how he leaves this area from Ur, and he goes to the area of Canaan that I was just telling you about, which is he doesn't go there. His descendants do, but they make a stop over here in Egypt. They make a stop over there in Egypt for a little bit, and then they go to Canaan. So we'll get into all of that. This period of time that we're talking about for you Bible scholars is the period of time that Jesus called the times of Noah, or this period of time would have preceded the period of the time of Noah. The times of Noah probably would have been the Neolithic, Stone Age, and then this is the beginning of the Bronze Age when the Sumerian nation came about. And there is a flood story that the Sumerian people have that is very similar to the story of Noah in the Hebrew Bible. There is a lot of people who believe that the story in the Hebrew Bible is a plagiarism of the flood story that the Sumerian people have in their mythology. But it could be that they are that each story is talking about the same flood event, but talking about it from a different point of view. I mean, the Sumerians don't only have one telling of this flood story. I mean, they have several tellings of this flood story. The most famous being the Epic of Gilgamesh, but there are others as well. I want to start by playing this clip. Let's start off. We're going to play this clip. This is a clip about the Sumerian flood story, and we'll listen to it and then talk a little bit about the relationship between the Sumerian flood story and the flood story in the Hebrew Bible. Take a listen.
To the ancient Sumerians, Enki was regarded as one of the most important deities, and was one of the three most powerful gods in the Sumerian pantheon, the other two being Anu and Enlil. Originally, Enki was worshipped as a god of fresh water and served as the patron deity of the city of Eridu, which the ancient Mesopotamians believed was the first city to have been established in the world. Over time, Enki's influence and importance grew, and he became associated with various phenomena having power over many aspects of life such as trickery, mischief, magic, creation, fertility, and intelligence.
Now listen to that. Listen to what Enki was the god over, what this guy says again, what Enki was the god over. Listen.
Over time, Enki's influence and importance grew, and he became associated with various phenomena having power over many aspects of life such as trickery, mischief, magic, creation.
Trickery, mischief, magic. Trickery, mischief, magic. And Enki was one of the main gods in the pantheon, the Anunnaki pantheon, and he was the god of trickery, mischief, and magic, and creation. Let's listen again.
Over many aspects of life such as trickery, mischief, magic, creation, fertility, and intelligence. He became known as the god of water, knowledge, crafts, and creation. In the Sumerian pantheon of gods, Enki was the son of Anu, the sky god, but in Babylonian lore, Enki was the son of Apsu, the primeval freshwater sea beneath the earth. Enki was also regarded as the son of Namu, the primordial mother goddess who gave birth to the heavens and the earth. Enki's wife was Ninhursag, and in mythology, one of their children was the powerful and well-known Babylonian deity Marduk. As you may already know, many of the literary works of Mesopotamia have survived over the millennia, and in these texts we learn a lot about Enki, who often plays a prominent central role. One such text documents the Sumerian creation myth, and it is known as the Eridu Genesis. It is found on a single fragmented tablet excavated in Nippur, a city that has origins dating back to around 5000 BC. The tablet in question dates back to around 1600 BC, and it states that the gods Anu, Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursagga created humanity as well as the first cities. Then a section of the tablet, and hence the story, is missing, and we next learn that the gods have decided not to save mankind from an impending flood. Ziud-Sara is the hero of the Sumerian tale, and Enki informing him of the impending flood and telling him to build an ark is missing from the Sumerian tablet. But a mention of Enki taking counsel with himself suggests that this is what Enki did. The later Babylonian flood myth, called Atrahasis, which is believed to be based on the older Sumerian tale, states that Enki instructed the flood myth hero to build a vessel and save humanity as well as the animals. The Sumerian tablet resumes at the time of the flood, and a terrible storm rocks the huge boat for 7 days and 7 nights. The sun god then appears, and Ziud-Sara creates an opening in the boat, prostrates himself, and sacrifices oxen and sheep. After another break, the text resumes and the flood is now over. The animals disembark, and Ziud-Sara prostrates himself before Anu, the sky god, and Enlil, the chief of the gods, who give him eternal life and take him to dwell in Dilmun for preserving the animals and the seed of mankind. Due to various linguistic similarities, as well as the content, the Sumerian flood story is believed to be the source of the Babylonian and the biblical tales, with Ziud-Sara changing into Atrahasis of Babylonia and Noah of the Bible.
So, there are a lot of similarities in the Sumerian flood story, the Babylonian flood story, and the flood story in the Hebrew Bible, but there are some differences as well. There's a few differences in the story that the Sumerians told and the Babylonians told. They each have their own different, what's the word I'm looking for? Protagonist, a hero. Noah is the hero in the Hebrew story. There's a different Hebrew or a different protagonist hero in the Babylonian story, and a different protagonist hero in the Sumerian story. Each story is centered around the different theology. The Babylonian people, Marduk, who was the son of Enki, it was the dominant deity in the Babylonian nation. And in the Sumerian nation, Enki or Inu is the dominant deity, and that matters. And in the Hebrew story, Yahweh is the dominant deity. I mean, in the Hebrew story, there are no other deities. In the Hebrew story, it's not pantheistic; it's monotheistic. That's one difference. In the Sumerian story, another difference is the reason why the flood happened. In the Sumerian story, the reason that Enki causes the flood is because there's too many people on the earth and they're making too much noise, and he's trying to sleep. That's the Sumerian story, is that there's too many people, they're making too much noise, and he's trying to sleep. So that's why he causes the flood. In the Hebrew story, God tells Noah that the reason he's going to call the flood is because the people have become wicked, and they're evil, and that's why. So I think those are very stark differe's. Even if you think that the people who wrote the Hebrew Bible took the story from the Sumerian story, there's some significant differences. So let's look at these gods. Let's start here with the gods that, hold on, that they talked about in the video we just watched. We'll start here with Enki. And then, like we were saying, you look here, Enki is the god of creation, but he is also the god of intelligence. He's the god of crafts, the god of fertility, semen. He's the god of magic and mischief again, magic and mischief. So magic and witchcraft that was central to their religion. You have to understand that magic and witchcraft was their religion. This is where the religion of witchcraft originated, and Enki, who is the god of magic, was a central figure in their pantheon. Another central figure in their pantheon, very powerful god, Enlil. Enlil was the god, you see it right here. Hold on. Enlil is the god of, I told you, they had almost 4,000 gods, and they had a god for every single thing. So Enlil, very powerful god in their pantheon, was the god of wind, air, earth, and storms. So this region of Mesopotamia, it was very prone to different weather events. These people didn't know anything about 4 seasons. So when the snow would melt in the spring up in the mountains of Turkey and at present-day Turkey and Anatolia, that snow would melt and it would flow into the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And every single year at the same time, the levels of the rivers would rise. They didn't know anything about the seasons or anything like that. So if you are a priest and you understand seasons because you understand the stars and you understand the cycles of the earth, traveling around the sun, and they believe that the earth traveled around the sun, you would be able to anticipate that spring is coming. The people who are not educated, who are on the lower level of the caste system, who don't know how to read and write, they don't know anything about seasons. So if you are a priest at this time who tells the people that the levels of the river are going to rise and there's going to be floods, or you know that the summer is coming and you can tell the people that there's going to be droughts because we're going into the summer, and you are telling the people that you control that because you control what the God Enlil here, who is the god of wind, the god of air, the god of earth and storms. If you know the storm's coming, the seasonal storm's coming, and you tell the people beneath you that you can control those storms if we do a sacrifice to Enlil, and you can make the people think that you control Enlil, who controls the wind, the air, and the earth, and you can dominate the people and dominate their minds through this religion. So Enlil, the god of earth, air, and storms, very powerful god. And then their father, the father of Enlil and Enki, is Anu. And Anu is the sky god. He's the king of the gods, like in the Greek pantheon. Anu would be Zeus. He would be, and that's the way that their pantheon went, that the gods were not the personifications of these things that they were the gods of, that Enlil is not the wind, the air, and the storms, not the personification. He controlled the wind, the air, and the storms. Anu is not the god of the sky. He controls the sky, and all of the gods are in this kingdom, this sky kingdom, and there is a hierarchy in the gods. Anu is the father of Enlil and Enki, but in some areas, in different cities, they would have different patron gods, even though they had the pantheon. They would have different patrons in the different cities. So it would depend on what city you went to, what god was the patron. So Uruk had its own patron god included in the pantheon, and that's how some of these gods like Enlil become more powerful than their father, who is the sky god, the king of the gods, Anu, because Enlil becomes the patron of certain cities, and then he becomes a more important god. But Anu is the father of the gods, and then his wife, Ki, is the goddess. So Anu is the godfather, and Ki is the goddess and the godmother. And you'll see that Ki here is the consort, chief consort, so the wife of An. So together you have Anu and Ki. That's where you get Anunnaki. You get from Anu and Ki are the fathers. By consort, Anu, also known as Anuna, Ki gave birth to the Anunnaki. So Ki gave birth to the other gods, Enlil and Enki, and more. There's several others too, but let's get into talking about what's going on in this region today of Mesopotamia, and then we'll get back to talking about these gods in the next podcast. So what is going on in this region of Mesopotamia today? There's a lot going on in this area today. The United States just lost 3 soldiers that were in Jordan, on the border of Jordan and Syria. We are engaged in a war in Syria, and we have been for a long period of time, but we're also in Iraq as well. I remember back in, I guess it was 2010, 2011, when Barack Obama, he campaigned in 2008 promising to bring the troops home from Iraq and end the war in Iraq. And we are still very much in Iraq. We are in what they call an advise and assist mission, and not in a war theater, but it is a war theater. The drone that killed the American soldiers yesterday on the border of Jordan and Syria, that drone came from Iraq. And I want you to listen to this clip. This is from one of the Sunday shows yesterday, and the representative from the Pentagon, he tells you that we are very much still in Iraq, and we are involved in war activities, not only in Iraq, also in Syria. And that's what happens when you're at war. When you're at war, you lose soldiers. I mean, the fact that we lost 3 soldiers and another, dozen or so were wounded in this attack, that's what happens in war. Why are we there? Did Congress approve the war in Syria. They did approve the war in Iraq back in 2002. But are we still in Iraq based on the congressional approval that they gave back in 2002? If that's the case, that's crazy. Why are we in the Middle East right now? And what is the mission? And why hasn't Congress demanded answers on what our role is there and what we are attempting to do in Syria and in Iraq? I mean, I know the answer in Syria. The answer in Syria is to get rid of the Assad regime, and that's been our goal going back to the Obama administration, that Assad must go. But let's take a listen to this clip of the representative from the Pentagon talking about what we're doing in Iraq there and confirming the fact that we do have a presence in Iraq, not only in Syria and in the surrounding area. This is a tinderbox. This has the potential of escalating into a huge and larger war that people are already talking about, that because of this attack on our soldiers that killed 3 soldiers yesterday, Nikki Haley has come out and said that we need to respond militarily. Of course, Lindsey Graham, that shouldn't surprise anyone. But not just those 2 war hawks. Many other war hawks have come out and said, we need to go and bomb Iran and make Iran pay because they killed 3 of our soldiers. Not asking the larger question, why are we even there? And this is something that I was saying, is that the drone came from Iraq, which Iran has a large presence in Iraq because of the Shia Muslim population there. And everybody knew that would happen. When Trump stood on the stage with Jeb Bush and told him that your brother going into Iraq in 2003 and taking out Saddam Hussein has destabilized the region, Trump couldn't be more right, because taking that peace out of the region, Saddam Hussein peace, and the Ba'athist Party, the Sunni Ba'athist Party that controlled the majority Shia residents, Muslims that lived in Iraq, that was a way to keep Iran in check. When you remove Saddam Hussein, then Iran has the ability to move into Iraq, a place where they never had the ability to move into before we took out Saddam. And now Iran is staging attacks on us in Syria, Jordan, from Iraq, which they never would have had access to if Saddam was still in power. So what Trump was saying was 100% right, that removing Saddam Hussein removed a key piece that stabilized the region. So now the region is destabilized. And take a listen to this clip.
The Iraqis have suggested that the presence of U.S. forces, after there was a retaliatory strike there, should be reassessed or maybe leave. Do you see in the future us reducing our forces or having the American forces leave Iraq?
Well, what I'll tell you is we're in Iraq by the invitation of the government of Iraq.
No, but that's not. But she just said. That's the point. She just said that the Iraqi government wants to renegotiate that invitation. That's what she said. And he says that we're there at the invitation of the government of Iraq. Yeah, so the government of Iraq wants to renegotiate that invitation. They want us gone because the government of Iraq is Shia Muslims, and Shia Muslims, they do whatever Iran says. The Ayatollah in Iran is the Pope of Shia Islam, is what you need to understand. So all Shia Muslims, no matter where they are, or they will get the support of the Iranian government. That's why Iran is backing Assad in Syria, because Assad is Alawite. the Muslims that are trying to overthrow Assad, the Free Syrian Army, are Sunni Muslims. So the Sunni Muslims are fighting Assad, who is Alawite, who is Shia, and Iran is backing the Shia regime, which is the Alawite regime under Assad. Iran backs Hezbollah in Lebanon because Hezbollah is Shia. The government in Iraq now, since we took the Sunni Ba'athist Party out, when we took Saddam Hussein out, now the Shia run Iraq. So this is the chairman of the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and she asked him. She says that the government in Iraq, the Shia government in Iraq, wants to reevaluate this mission and your presence, the United States government's presence in Iraq. And he says, well, we're there at their invitation. That's the whole purpose of the question. Listen again.
The Iraqis have suggested that the presence of U.S. forces, after there was a retaliatory strike there, should be reassessed or maybe leave. Do you see in the future us reducing our forces or having the American forces leave Iraq?
Well, what I'll tell you is we're in Iraq by the invitation of the government of Iraq. And I'll also tell you that we will defend ourselves.
Do you see us leaving? Is that what Iran would want?
Well, I think that's what Iran would want.
It's not only what Iran would want. It's what the government that we tried to legitimize there in Iraq, that's what they want, obviously. At least they want to renegotiate our presence because they have more of an allegiance to Iran. So what are we doing there? Why? And you just heard him say that we have a presence in Iraq. We have a presence in Syria. Let's not forget the Wesley Clark 7. Let's listen to the Wesley Clark 7 again, so we can remember what Wesley Clark said and which countries are included in the Wesley Clark 7. Take a listen.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So that's the Wesley Clark 7. Iraq, check. Syria, check. Libya, check. Trying to take us to Iran now, check. And then Sudan, what were the other 2? Sudan, here, let's listen again.
He picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So Lebanon, that's where Hezbollah is. So all of the connections to Iran. Syria, I've already told you that the Alawite government in Syria is Shia. So Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Iraq. So that's the Levant, those four. And then in Africa, Sudan, Libya, which we've already, Libya checked, got rid of Gaddafi. And that's it, right? What am I forgetting? I'm forgetting one. It's the Wesley Clark 7. It's the 7 countries. What am I forgetting? So Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Sudan, and Somalia. I think he says Somalia. Let's listen again here.
Sudan, and finishing off Iran. In Syria, 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Somalia. And so those are the Wesley Clark 7. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Wesley Clark says that this was 9 days after 9/11, and that he's in the Pentagon, and one of the generals there. Now, remember, this guy was a general himself, either 4 or 5-star general himself. I mean, why would he lie about this? That he's in the Pentagon and another general shows him a piece of intelligence where the Bush administration had already decided that we're going into Iraq 9 days after 9/11. And then he comes back a week later and he talks to the same general, and he says that, are we still going into Iraq? And then the guy tells him it's worse than that. We're not only going into Iraq, we're going into Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan. And we're going to hit all those countries and change the regime. Now, if you go back to what I told you in the podcast that we did last Monday, and we were talking about Richard Dearlove. Richard Dearlove was the head of British intelligence, head of MI6, during this time that Richard Clark is talking about. And Richard Dearlove, he's recorded in the Downing Street memo saying that the Bush administration had already decided in 2002 that the Bush administration had already decided to go into Iraq, and that the facts and the evidence were being fixed around the policy. That's what Richard Dearlove says. So what's really going on here, people? What is really going on with why we are in Mesopotamia? Why are we involved in these regime change wars, and why are we still 24 years or 23 years after 9/11 still involved in these regime change missions? Why are we still trying to change the regime in Syria? Why did we change the regime in Libya? Libya is another one. We were just talking about Saddam and what us changing the regime in Iraq did to destabilize Iraq. Removing Gaddafi from Libya also destabilized North Africa. Not only Gaddafi, we remove Hosni Mubarak from Egypt. You remember the Arab Spring that Hillary Clinton celebrated as the Secretary of State. Remember that we lost an ambassador on 9/11 in Libya. Where did we lose the ambassador in Libya? I'm drawing blank on that. But we lost 2 soldiers and an ambassador there because of all that Arab Spring chaos that basically sparked out of the war in Libya when we took our military without congressional approval to remove the Gaddafi regime in Libya. That totally destabilized all of North Africa. It created a pathway for all of the migrants that are flooding Europe, just like the migrants are flooding the United States. The migrants are flooding Europe from North Africa, and they're coming from Libya, Tunisia in boats, and taking the boats across the Mediterranean into Italy. And just like Texas is the door for the United States, Italy is the door for Europe, and they're coming into Italy. They're not staying in Italy, and they're going all over Europe. This has been happening for 20 years to destabilize Europe. This is all part of their plan, all part of their plan. And they will tell you that it's a theory. If you say that this is going on, they'll say, well, you believe in the conspiracy theory about the Great Replacement. No, it's not conspiracy theory. We're watching it happen. We're watching it happen in the United States. We're watching it happen in Europe. You're creating the refugee problem in the Middle East, to where everybody in Europe and the United States, we have to take in these refugees because you're creating the problem. You created the problem. Bush, Obama, Biden. You're creating the problem. Let's take a listen to this clip. This is a clip about the soldiers that were just killed on the border of Jordan and Syria yesterday.
But of course, we begin here with our big story. U.S. officials are saying the enemy drone that hit a U.S. base in Jordan was possibly confused with an American drone. Now, this comes as the Iranian Foreign Ministry is denying any involvement in that attack that killed 3 American service members. And we now know the names of those Army reservists. 46-year-old Sergeant William Jerome Rivers, 24-year-old Kennedy Landon Sanders, and 23-year-old Brianna Alexandria Moffett, all from the state of Georgia. The attack marking the first line of fire deaths for U.S. troops since the start of this Israel-Hamas war.
So what does this have to do with the Israel-Hamas war? Why would you even say that? That this has, we're involved in a war in Syria that has nothing to do with the Israeli-Hamas war. I mean, what does this have? Why would you even bring that in? Just because it's all in the same region? And you don't think that the American public understands the difference between what's going on in Israel and what's going on in Syria? The two aren't related at all. And the Iranian government says that they didn't have anything to do with this. And the story about it being what she says here, take a listen.
Any involvement in that attack that killed 3 American service members, possibly confused with an American drone.
Confused with an American drone. What's that all about? Listen again. Listen to what she says.
But of course, we begin here with our big story. U.S. officials are saying the enemy drone that hit a U.S. base in Jordan was possibly confused with an American drone.
What does that mean? The enemy drone that hit the target was confused with an American drone. Well, what she's talking about, the story came out that the American drone went out to conduct a mission, a bombing mission, a reconnaissance mission, whatever the drone was doing. And then when the drone was coming back to the base is the same time the enemy drone was coming back. So they're on the base and they're looking at the radar of the two drones coming in, and that's what they confused. They confused the incoming drone for the drone that we had sent out to do its mission. They thought that the drone that we had sent out to do its mission was coming back, and it was actually the enemy drone, and the enemy drone exploded. I don't know anything about these drones, but I do know that about a decade ago, under the Obama administration, that the Iranians downed one of our drones, and they took it. Probably they have taken this drone and one of our drones and reverse engineered it. I don't know if that has anything to do with the confusion, but that's what she's talking about here, that there was confusion when the drone was coming back in, and they thought that it was one of our drones, which perhaps the Iranians have taken and reverse engineered the drone that they took captive of. about a decade ago. I'm not sure exactly when that happened, but I distinctively remember the Iranians taking one of our drones and downing it, and without it being destroyed, and they took it, and they very well could have reverse engineered it. I don't know if that has anything to do with the confusion, but there was confusion, is what the reporter says. Let's listen one more time.
But of course, we begin here with our big story. U.S. officials are saying the enemy drone that hit a U.S. base in Jordan was possibly confused with an American drone. Now, this comes as the Iranian Foreign Ministry is denying any involvement in that attack that killed 3 American service members.
Iran's saying they don't have anything to do with that attack. and quite frankly, I'm not sure that the story isn't one of our drones was coming back in and maybe it was friendly fire. Who knows? But Iran's saying that they didn't have anything to do with it. But relating it to what is happening in Israel is completely dishonest, because it doesn't have anything to do with what's happening in Israel. It has to do with our mission in Syria. That's what's going on there. And all of this tough talk about Iran, how can you have all this tough talk about Iran when the Biden administration and the Obama administration has released all this money to Iran? Even if it was Iran responsible for the attack, Iran's using money that the United States, the Biden administration, and the Obama administration has given to the mullahs. Let me tell you, people, if you know any Persian people from Iran that live in the United States, live in Europe, in Canada, if you know any Persian people, talk to them and ask them what they think about the United States government and the mullahs. They will tell you that they believe that the mullahs and the United States government are in cahoots, and that this whole narrative around the United States wanting war with Iran is all a big show, and that they don't want any war. They don't want to make the mullah's life difficult at all, and that bears out to be true when you look at all of the money that the Obama administration and the Biden administration have released to the mullahs. The mullahs treat their citizens like slaves. The people in Iran are under a tyrannical government, and they treat the people there like slaves. And they're the only ones with the guns, the mullahs. I guess it was a year ago, you had the uprising because the woman was killed in the custody of the Iranian police. There was an uprising throughout the entire country. Did the Biden administration, did the Western governments support those people that were demonstrating in the streets, being shot by the mullahs? Did they do anything to help those people? No. They release money to them, is what the Biden administration does. I mean, look at this article. Let me expand this so you can see. You look at how the Russians were treated when the war in Ukraine started, and the Biden administration targeted anyone who was Russian, the Russian oligarchs, wherever they may be. The Biden administration targeted them, and they made their lives a living hell for any Russians that were living outside of Russia. The Russian oligarchs, they seized their properties, they seized their yachts, their family members. They made it difficult. This is a report. 4,000 children of Iranian regime officials living abroad, living here in the United States, going to prestigious colleges. They have property. The mullahs have property outside of Iran, all over the world. Are there kids being the children of the Iranian regime? Are they being harassed in London where they live, in the United States, in California where they live? Are they being harassed? Are their funds being seized? The children of the Iranian officials that live abroad? No, none of that stuff's happening. That's what happened to the Russians, but that's not what's happening to the children of the Iranian officials that are living abroad, living great lives in the West. That's not happening. Why is that not happening? Take a listen to this clip.
Is this attack that has killed 3 service members an act of war by Iran?
Well, look, I think I said this earlier. We don't seek a war with Iran. We don't seek to widen this conflict. We have said, and we will continue to call out, the fact that Iran does fund and equip these groups and provide them the capabilities that they use to attack our service members, whether it be Iraq, Syria, or Jordan. So we're not going to hesitate in calling that out. But we certainly don't seek a war. And frankly, we don't see Iran wanting to seek a war with.
So you guys are all buddies. They're all buddies. We don't seek a war. They don't want to seek a war. I mean, you're telling us that they killed our soldiers and they are funding all of these militia groups with the money that you gave them, Biden. You gave them this money, but they don't seek a war. We don't seek a war. There's something very fishy about this. Something very fishy about what's going on with Iran and the United States. Let's go now to this clip. This is Joe Biden promising to respond to the attack that killed the 3 American soldiers yesterday. I mean, who's he going to respond against? You just heard the representative from the Pentagon saying that they're not looking for a larger war with Iran, and they don't think that Iran is interested in a war with us. And Iran has said that they didn't have anything to do with that attack yesterday. So who's he going to respond against when he says that he's going to respond? Listen to Joe Biden here.
One last thing, I want to point out that we had a tough day last night in the Middle East. We lost 3 brave souls in attacking one of our bases.
Yes.
And I've asked you for a moment of silence for all 3 of those fallen soldiers.
Jesus.
And we shall respond.
And we shall respond. And we shall respond is what he says. We lost 3 brave souls and we shall respond. Well, I remember when you got those 3 brave souls killed yesterday, Joe Biden, because they shouldn't be in Syria. There's no reason for them to be there. And you put them in harm's way and you got them killed. Just like you got the 13 soldiers killed in Afghanistan with your failed Afghanistan withdrawal. When you closed Bagram Air Base and tried to evacuate everyone from the airport there at Kabul, you got 13 Americans killed, and then you promised to respond, just like you promised to respond to these 3 Americans getting killed. The problem is that when you responded in Afghanistan, you responded by killing a family of 10 and 7 children. That's how you responded. You killed a family of 10 and 7 children. So I just hope that you don't respond, to this the same way you responded to what happened in Afghanistan. The fact of the matter is that the Biden administration is an absolute failure. It's a failure. It's a mess. And I don't understand how people can't see how disastrous this administration is. But we have an opportunity to make a change coming up here in about 10 months. And God, I hope that people make the right decision. That's the show, folks. Episode 181. We'll be back on Friday. We're going to get back into talking about the Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki, their pantheon, and how it relates to what we're going through today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll be back soon.